Hiya again. Okay, I mean, that's the kind of interruption I don't need. Hello. Ferdy, that's not helpful, is it? Not helpful. So I'm in my bedroom, which is a bit creepy on many, many levels. I do apologise, but God, that's really unflattering as well. What is going on with that angle? But it's the only place I can escape from my family. Obviously, the dog's with me. So we're going to carry on with observation today, and we're going to look at covert non-participant observation. And I hope you've already taken notes on this from the textbook, because you were to take notes on every kind of observation. So covert non-participant observation, this is where it gets really odd, because you are not participating, so you're not taking part, but you are watching people without them knowing. Yeah, odd. Now, if you had something like a two-way mirror, you could do that, let's say, at a sort of identity parade in a police cell. But setting up a two-way mirror in most environments is going to give your game away. And so somehow you've just got to watch people without them knowing you're watching them. You're not joining in, you're just staring. So let's think about how that might work. I've put some examples on page 47 in the booklet and asked you to pick one, but spoiler alert, the one I'm hoping you're saying that you could maybe carry off this is observing football hooligans at a football match. I mean, particularly playground interactions in a primary school. Yeah, that's not going to work without the police getting involved. I think I told you that once when Archie was little, he was accused of being really badly behaved in the playground, which he possibly was. But I thought I'd do my own investigation and stood behind the railings of his school and peered through during break time, but did get moved on. Don't try that at home for sure. He was being naughty is the upshot of that as well. So we're going to look at observing football hooligans on the terrace. Now, again, not something I necessarily suggest you, well, not at the moment because there's no football, but anyway, because getting near to football hooligans might have some notable risks. Can I just say, those curtains are meant to be antique gold, but in this light, they look really orange, and it's really not flattering. But I just want everyone to know my lovely velvet curtains are not orange. Thank you. Just wanted to clear that up there. Antique gold. Thank you. Much more shabby chic. Did you agree, Ferdy? Or are you just being annoying again? Right, so at the bottom of page 42, there are some words, are key concepts that, as you know, you have to use in every answer to get a decent mark. So let's have a look over the page. I've put write down your chosen research area. So let's assume it's football hooligans on a terrace. So presumably, I mean, how are you going to do this? Stand a couple of rows behind them, near them. There's going to be some pros and cons to this. So how can we justify using this technique to observe football hooligans who probably aren't, I just cannot get this angle right. Someone needs to tell me how to do these videos. See, I thought that was better, but then I look like a blancmange. Never mind. We can work with that. Blancmange against orange curtains. So the notable first advantage is going to be there is no Hawthorne effect. Now, that's really important. As you know, the Hawthorne effect is when people know they're being watched and they start to impression manage their behaviour, almost certainly. But if you're just observing this group and they don't know it, they're not going to be impression managing their behaviour, and there'll be no Hawthorne effect, which will give it much higher validity because they're probably acting in a truthful way. Okay. Equally, the stay-in's a tricky one. Can you take a walk in the shoes of a football hooligan by just standing behind them? I mean, you may get some kind of insight into their worlds and their motivations. You may be close enough to hear some conversations between them, look at their outfits, look at their interactions, etc. But you always hold the risk of getting caught, and that might not be any fun at all. And therefore, you probably need to keep distance. For stay-in's a tricky one. Okay. Objectivity. Now, objectivity, remember, is a good thing in research. It means that you're not applying your own values to the research. That reduces researcher bias. You're being objective. You're being factual about what you see. Now, it's probably much easier to be factual and objective when you're not involved. You're not forming relationships with this group of people. You're just watching. And therefore, you're probably maintaining more objectivity. That's going to be good for your research because there'll be less research bias, higher validity. Researcher effect, not a problem in the sense that they don't know you're watching, so they're not going to be affected by who you are. But I guess there's always the problem when you're, observing a group like football hooligans decked out in their Stone Island, etc., and their tattoos. Maybe that's a stereotype, I don't think so. And you're standing behind them in a kind of headband and pretty summer frock. You may attract attention you don't want, but also you might not be able to blend in. They may smell a rat. Okay. Other problems. Ethics clearly is a problem. I have not got informed consent from them, so there's clearly deceit involved. I guess if you keep all of their identities secret and anonymous, then you're unlikely to cause any long-term harm to them. God, you can tell I haven't talked for a while. But certainly you have not got informed consent. Not reliable. So remember, the two things we want research to be reliable are, is it standardised, i.e. identical every time you carry it out, and can it be accurately repeated, therefore, to check for consistency of results, spot trends and patterns. Clearly it can't be. You are just seeing what is put in front of you. There is no way to standardise that. So it lacks reliability. Can you access the sample? There's a problem, a kind of practical problem. Can you access the sample? Again, often football hooligans, just for example, will be season ticket holders. There may be very fixed kind of positions that people stand in that you can't mess with. They may have more expensive tickets. There's a whole range of problems that might arise with access to this group. And as I've already mentioned with search characteristics, if you can't pull off looking like a proper football fan, you may struggle to infiltrate even the area this group are inhabiting. Researcher bias. I mean, I said you're more likely to remain objective because you are not involved in the group, you're not participating. But I would find it hard to watch certain groups like football hooligans without thinking, you've spoilt football for a lot of kids, you've terrified kids, you've given our country a bad reputation. It would be really hard to go in without some sort of bias. Although, can I say, I went out with someone I discovered was a football hooligan who's very nice, former football hooligan. And I was in my 20s. I'm just saying that he was lovely. Anyway, I didn't see him at football. Right. As we know, I make poor choices sometimes. Funding is expensive. Football tickets are expensive, particularly if you're going to a kind of Premiership team. You'd be lucky to go anywhere at the moment, but in normal circumstances. Also, you may want to go back a number of times to get a sort of full picture of what this group are up to. That's going to cost a lot of money. And also a lot of your time, and you may not have that kind of funding in your budget. Unrepresentative sample. Football hooligans, say for example, Chelsea headhunters. I watched a lot on them. They're a real nasty group. They're football hooligans for guess who? Chelsea. But they're also kind of neo-Nazis. They're thoroughly unpleasant, racist, violent. They possibly haven't got that much in common with someone that stands at the Shabby Abbey in Cambridge kind of swearing at the opposition. I mean, I don't know, maybe they do, but I would say it's not a representative sample unless you could go around a lot of football grounds looking at all the different divisions, different ethnicities, different social classes, etc., etc. Okay, I'm trying to think of another example of covert non-participant observation. Now, there's an example I wanted to talk to you about and you can take notes on. It's someone called Lord Humphreys, and that's spelled L-A-U-D. He's not actually a lord. He's just mad. And I'm going to give you some more info on this when we finally meet again. But Lord Humphreys did a piece of research called the tea room trade. You heard that right, the tea room trade. Now, it turns out the tea room trade is a kind of insider's name for what I thought was called cottaging. There's no way to dress it up. It's men, gay men or men having sex in public toilets. I have to say, I don't care if people are gay or not. I just don't want to bump into anyone having sex in the toilet. And also, just don't have sex in the toilet. Where? Or in public. Tip for the day, class. Anyway, Lord Humphreys decided to go and look at the relationships, the niceties, the etiquette of the tea room trade, of cottaging. For whatever reason, he chose to do that. Now, you could kind of sell it as participant or non-participant. He certainly wasn't having sex with other men in the toilet, so in that sense he's non-participant. But in order to kind of get away with just watching, he said he was a lookout and that he'd kind of call if the police were coming. If anyone believed that, they kind of deserved the fate. Anyway, it got worse and worse and worse, because eventually, after chatting to these guys, finding out why they were involved in costume, he did things like take down their car number plates, follow them home, and try and interview them there where their wives were and stuff. I mean, the ethics are all over the place. So let's just think about that. A guy not taking part in sex in public toilets, but observing other people doing it. I mean, ethically, that's obviously all over the place, in the sense that no informed consent, he could cause massive harm and distress in their outside lives if he ever pursued interviewing them, which he did, particularly if he revealed their identities. In the end, it ended actually in a big punch-up in his sociology department, very scandalous, and I think he got sacked. I mean, it was a crazy piece of research, but it's famous and it's useful. No Hawthorne effect, in the sense that they didn't know he wasn't just a voyeur and a lookout, and so they carried on with what they were doing with gay abandon, without a care in the world. Is that offensive? Sorry if it was. Apologies if it was. I don't think it was. Okay. So you can look up more on that delightful piece of research if you fancy it. Right, I'm going to leave it there, and I'm going to come back in a minute with, let me do these in the right order, covert participant observations. So we're going to look at, still people don't know you're watching, but you're joining in with them this time, if that's any better. Okay, speak to you in a bit. Bye.